So good evening, everyone. I'm convening the May 21st meeting of the Board of Directors of Marin Clean Energy in our great new conference room in our new office space, and it's very nice. Any board announcements? Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Peter. I think this is your first meeting from Town of Fairfax. Which
The alternate for Fairfax, I'm Peter Lax, filling in for Barbara Kohler tonight.
fantastic. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh. Any board announcements? So I have an announcement. So we set flight to our owls, our sea level rise visualization devices today, which are located on the multi-use pathway in Mill Valley on Miller at the intersection with Almonte Boulevard. And thanks to MCE for some support for that particular project and some tabling by Justin today. It was great to have your presence there. So this is for those of, many of you I've talked to about this, for those of you who don't know about it, this is a fantastic leading edge. This is the first installation of devices of this sort. It's modeled after the traditional viewer where you look through and you saw for a great distance. With these viewers, you look through and you see in the immediate surrounding where you are, you see current conditions, king tides, 3 feet of sea level rise. You see a couple of alternative adaptation strategies, and it's interactive. It asks you questions and you can respond, and it's just a very cool device. So it'll be in place for 12 weeks, and I hope everyone will stop by between now and August 10th and check it out and see what you think. So we're very excited about it. Yeah, Autodesk Wizardry created the visualizations, and a lot of people have said, well, it looks like a photograph. I mean, it's so real. It's not a photograph or whatever. So come check out the magic. So, all right. Public open time? Do we have a public? We don't have a public. Report from Executive Officer, Dawn.
Great. For those of you that haven't yet come to a committee meeting, we typically will be holding the committee meetings in the Barbara George conference room, which is just down the hall to the right. Or if we have a big enough crowd for a committee meeting, we may be holding those meetings in here as well. Parking, of course, is always available in our parking lot. We also share parking lots with the Dance Art Studio across the street here. So if you're looking for parking, there's no room in our lot or nearby on the street, it's okay to use that lot in the evenings. So I think that's it for the logistics. I wanted to ask if you could to state your name before you speak, and if you're launching into a topic, you don't need to state your name every time if we're having a back and forth dialogue, but that will help with the person who's keeping track of our minutes to kind of be able to recognize who's talking at what time. Sometimes it's hard to tell since she's not here in the room. She does it after the fact. And then I have a couple of updates. I wanted to let folks know that we have completed the initial phase 1 of building here at this location. We will soon be moving into phase 2, which is going to be the elevator addition. The elevator is going to be installed right outside in the parking lot area on this side of the building. It'll be a 3-stop elevator, so folks can get on at the parking lot level, go up to get to the first floor here, and then go up to the second floor. If they have an access card or a staff member giving them access, they can come up to the second floor. That is expected to be complete sometime this summer. We're also in the process of developing plans for a solar carport shade structure to go in the parking lot there, as well as some electric vehicle charging to go both in our parking lot and then on the street where the public parking is. We're working with Santa Fe on a design and some of the initial layout for permitting. Along with that, we'll also be installing the fence that's going to go around the parking lot. It'll be a kind of a wrought iron black fence that kind of matches the front gate in front of the building there. Also, I wanted folks to know that we do have security cameras in place throughout the building with live monitoring, and we have a motion sensor alarm system that's activated when we don't have anyone in the building, and we have an activated fire alarm system in place. So I just wanted to let folks know that that's all up and running currently. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight a couple of the green features of the building, just so that folks are aware and can brag to your fellow council members and public. There's also a poster highlighting the green aspects of the building in the energy efficiency workshop room, so you can see pictures of things. Just a few highlights. We have recycled glass countertops in the restrooms. We have carpet tiles, which means if you have a spill, you don't have to replace the whole carpet. You can just replace one tile at a time. Low VOC paints were used throughout the building, reused materials throughout the building. Where possible, we increased the natural light in the building with the renovation to reduce the need for light, and then installed LED lighting with motion sensors and light sensors. So when there's enough light in the room, the lights will automatically dim or turn off. We have contracted with a worker-owned cleaning company to do the cleaning here in the building, and they're using green building supplies, including recycled paper products and non-bleached paper products. We're also using a local landscaping company, and we are composting. So you may notice in that room, when you're ready to throw out anything that is made of paper or as a food product, it can go in the composting bin. That's it for the office space update. Are there any questions before I move on to the last item? Okay, great. I wanted to give a quick enrollment update and let folks know that the enrollment in all 4 of the new communities is going very smoothly. We're seeing a participation rate of 90 to 95% in all communities, and a lot of interest in our Deep Green program. Napa and El Cerrito in particular have really been signing up a lot lately for El Cerrito. El Cerrito's at 423 Deep Green enrollments. Benicia also is seeing a lot of Deep Green enrollments lately as well. So that's exciting to see. And the last item I wanted to mention is that MCE received the Actera 2015 Business Environmental Award in the category of Environmental Innovation for our Community Choice Aggregation Program. I think I mentioned this at our last board meeting, but wanted to let folks know that MCE will be honored at the Business Environmental Awards reception in Silicon Valley on May 28th in Mountain View. And if anyone is interested in participating, let us know and we can give you logistical information. It'll be an evening event. And that's it for my report. Yep.
Alan Schwartzman here. So, Dawn, could you help me out? You just mentioned participation rates averaging around 90%?
Yes.
Okay, so in Benicia, that is not the case, I don't believe.
You're correct. In Benicia, we are at 82%.
Yeah, I thought we were approaching about a 20% opt-out.
Yeah,
That's why. Okay,
that's
thank
correct.
Any other questions for Dawn? Yes, please, Kevin.
There, it's green. I just was asking Dawn if she could comment on her participation at the Power Association of Northern California Conference this week, which I attended, and
Yeah.
you spoke.
Yeah.
And you actually I thought were one of the best received speakers at that program, and really appreciated your representation. So maybe you could comment on that just briefly.
Yeah, it was a really interesting event. It was an annual PANK seminar, very well attended. The room was packed. The PANK luncheons, for those of you that have not attended, PANK stands for the Power Association of Northern California. It's really an industry, energy industry heavy group, and they typically put on educational events, typically lunches once a month. And they tend to draw a crowd that is heavy with utility representatives, folks from PG&E, Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, also representatives from the commission. A lot of commissioners, aides, staff at the CPUC participate, and then developers and energy sellers and brokers typically participate. So it's a very energy savvy crowd, and the focus of the event this year, they have lunches throughout the year, but this is kind of their once a year day where they have a longer program. They had a representative from CAISO open the meeting to talk a lot about changes that we're going to be seeing in the real-time CAISO market. We had comments from the newest commissioner, Lane Randolph, and that was the first time I'd seen her speak, so it was interesting to get some insights from her on what she's going to be doing on the CPUC reform front and what she sees happening in the energy sector in general. I think she's very open to seeing changes going forward that will benefit customers and choice. I had the opportunity to speak on a panel that was focused on how choice can drive innovation or that was how I interpreted the topic, and talked a lot about how the choices that we provide and the programs that we develop are helping move the state towards the governor's goals for more renewable energy and more energy efficiency and more flexible use of energy and load control. And it seemed to be very well received. And so I think it was a great event. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
I think it was really well received, and I think your comments and your participation on that panel were noted by everyone in that room, some friendly and some less friendly, but noted in a positive way by everyone. So I just really was grateful for the opportunity to be there and watch you do your thing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I will say these chairs are very comfortable.
Good to know.
It is a good thing. I will, and ergonomically appropriate. I think they're great. All right, so we're now on the consent calendar. We have 5 items on our consent calendar: the April 16th meeting minutes, approved contracts update, MCE staff position adjustments, a first addendum to a first agreement with Low Voltage Security, Inc., and a first addendum to second agreement with the PFM Group. Does anyone have any comments or items that they would like to pull from consent?
Not cool, but just
Yeah,
a comment.
please.
I'm Ford Green. I wanted to express my appreciation for the drafter of the minutes so clearly identifying who the speakers were in response to my comment last time around, so thank you.
Ray with the abstain on C1. I wasn't here last time.
Super. All right, any other comments on the minutes? I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Well, I need to abstain also, Alan Schwartzman. I was not here.
Thank you very much.
And the same for me, Andrew McCullough.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain also on the minutes.
Gary Lyon is abstaining. Yeah, it's
And I
catching
will
on
as
like a
well.
virus.
Peter Lax, I
Lax.
wasn't here last month.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right. I have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Yes.
We've got the abstentions and the opposition to approval of the consent calendar. Seeing none. All right. So now we're going to move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is a resolution for MCE to serve as regional liaison for property assessed clean energy programs in Marin County, or PACE programs. So Dawn, are you introducing this? Becky, Greg, who's up?
As this is new and weird for me, but hello. Okay, great. So good evening, members of the board. We have a staff report and a number of materials here before you today, but I'll provide just a little bit of background before we ask for action on tonight's item. For those of you who are new to the game, PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing. It's a form of financing which public jurisdictions can allow in their areas where property owners can voluntarily opt into tax assessments which are then placed on their property. And then that allows a form of financing for them to do renewable energy improvements, water conservation improvements, and even most recently earthquake retrofits, which the financing is then secured by the property and therefore can also transfer with the property. So this innovation first entered into California in 2008 and since has grown like wildfire. We at this board supported a PACE program when I very first started here in 2012, the California First PACE program. So some of you were around for that and may remember that. Many of the individual cities within the area have actually authorized California First to operate in your service territories as well. So what has changed? Since that time, residential PACE has become something that folks are more and more interested in operating in the area, and a lot of new providers have entered the marketplace. And when it comes down to it, the county doesn't really have a good reason to point to one provider versus another, but we need to make action to authorize any of these providers to operate in our area. So currently, California First is the only PACE administrator that has the ability to administer in the county and in many of the jurisdictions in the area. But there are roughly 4 other administrators who have come to the county seeking authorization to administer their programs locally. Given this landscape, we looked to our neighbors to the north, Sonoma County, and saw what they have done there because Sonoma have been leaders on the PACE program for many years. And what the County of Sonoma had done is started something called an open market PACE program, where they allow any operator to have their program in their jurisdiction as long as they're willing to sign an agreement that requires them to abide by a certain set of baseline best practices in administering PACE programs. And we think this is a great idea. It allows competition in the marketplace. It removes us from having to make a determination about whether one administrator is better than another, but at the same time, it allows us to set this baseline set of best practices for these administrators so that they can operate within our region. So we've been working as MCE staff very closely with the county sustainability team on this provision. It is actually the county and the cities that will have to take individual action in order to authorize these administrators to offer their program in your service territory. So that leads us to what we're here before you today for. In 2012, when California first came into the area and started operating its program, MCE offered to act as a regional liaison for this program. What that means is that we have been willing to operate as a storefront. We offered lead generation services for the administrators, connecting folks who are interested in participating in the program, who have projects that they're looking for financing for, with those different administrators. And we are looking to continue to serve in that role for each of the programs that operate. Additionally, we've developed this agreement in conjunction with the county that we're seeking authorization for the executive officer to execute. This agreement establishes some of the baseline practices, and in your staff report, I outlined some of the features of that, which I'd like to briefly address. The first of which is that, as I mentioned, it establishes both MCE and also the county as a team to work together to interface and actually execute the terms of the agreement. This would require occasionally checking in on the different providers to make sure that they're complying with some of the things that we've asked them to do. It designates MCE as the liaison. Not only would we do the lead generation activities that I spoke about before, but we also are helping the county to prepare packet materials for each of the individual cities so that if and when the county does choose to authorize these different administrators to act, the cities can closely follow suit. So that involves developing draft staff reports, developing draft resolution language, and interacting with the city managers and with the council members at each of those jurisdictions to answer questions and make sure that that material is ready to go so the process can be streamlined and quick. We're also requesting all providers to have clearly visible disclosures regarding the FHFA's policies on residential PACE programs. This one is fairly important as FHFA has had somewhat of a standoffish approach towards residential PACE. We don't want to inflate the risk, especially considering that 68% of mortgages within Marin in particular are non-conforming mortgages. But we do think it's very important that homeowners understand the stance that FHFA has towards residential programs. So we've reviewed each of the packages that the providers offer to their residential customers to make sure that we feel comfortable that those disclosures are appropriately highlighted and on separate signature pages. We also are requiring affirmative lender acknowledgement of participation in the program from commercial applicants. This is a little above and beyond what a lot of other programs ask for, but we think it's really important to ensure that the OCC continues to support commercial PACE. We're also limiting claims that providers or their designated contractors can make regarding tax liability. This has been one of the big sticking points among the different providers. As the PACE assessment is paid back on property tax, a certain proportion of that financing is eligible for a deduction on your taxes on an annual basis, similar to property tax. However, the amount of that deduction varies depending on the type of financing, depending on the type of homeowner, depending on your tax liability. And therefore, we think it's very important that rather than making claims regarding that tax liability, the providers refer homeowners to a tax professional, home or business applicants to a tax professional. So that's been one of the baseline practices that we think is really important so that claims aren't made that can't be justified. And we've also sought external legal counsel on this position and find that our recommendation is sound. One other thing is that we're asking for data sharing between the providers and MCE. We think this is very important so that we understand what types of projects are being done in our county, who is participating, and how much money is basically operating under the PACE program. This is helpful not only so we can have baseline tracking and see what the activity level is, but also so that we can track regarding our climate goals with the Marin County Climate Program. And then the final provision that we're asking for here is requiring providers to accept responsibility for negligence in administering PACE programs. An example of what we anticipate this negligence could be is if they do make a claim to a homeowner that they can deduct, for example, 100% of the PACE assessment on their taxes, and it turns out that that claim is not justified, and therefore the homeowner finds themselves in a cash flow constrained situation that they did not otherwise anticipate. So in this position, we've seeked a provision that would require the provider to accept responsibility for that. Those are the baseline terms of the agreement. You'll find in your packet the agreement itself. It is nearly final, but it is not quite final. We're negotiating final terms with the providers. The only outstanding piece at this point is related to the privacy language. Because we are requesting data from the providers on the different types of programs that are operating and who's participating, they want to see assurances from us, MCE and the county, that we have the right provisions in place to protect that data. So that final piece is under negotiation. We're confident that we'll be able to reach settlement on that, given that we, as an agency, handle sensitive customer information on a regular basis. So what we're requesting for action tonight is, I want to make sure I get the wording of this right, that you approve Resolution 2015-03 to establish MCE as the regional liaison for PACE programs in Marin County and authorize the CEO of Marin Clean Energy to finalize and execute the agreement for collaborative services for the PACE financing marketplace. And I would love to accept any questions at this time.
So let me ask one question, then I'll come over to you, Gary. So just to emphasize that last point, we are not expecting that there would be any changes in the agreement that's in front of us other than the privacy provision that you're currently negotiating.
That is the
Right.
point. Although I should note that this agreement is, we will have to send the privacy language back to the providers for final review.
Got it. Gary? Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, Gary Lyon. It's mentioned that you're expected that the cities will follow up with allowing the providers. Will you provide us some standard or a model ordinance or whatever we need to do? And a
Absolutely.
resolution, whatever it is, that also refers back to this agreement so we can all,
That's the idea. Our plan, I'm working with Dana on this point, Dana Armanino at the County of Marin, who's wonderful. And our plan is to prepare a set of documents for the cities that they could choose to adopt if they wish, that would incorporate this agreement by reference and would apply to each of the administrators. Many of you may already have been approached by these administrators. I know that some of you have been getting a lot of attention from these administrators. So we're going to do what we can to help make that process smooth.
that's great, thank you.
And, Ford, did you have something? Sorry, just a second.
Becky, just, is this on? Go on. Yes,
Identify yourself, too.
Sloan Bailey, Port of Madeira. Becky, just a procedural question. The report asks not only that we approve the resolution, but also that we authorize the CEO to execute the collaborative agreement. Is that second authority, the one to execute the agreement, is that in writing in anywhere, or it's simply the motion itself passes that authority to Dawn? Saw it? And that's done entirely verbally?
Correct.
Got it.
Okay,
Ford?
Ford, Green, San Anselmo. When you talk about how 46% of the mortgages in Marin are non-conforming mortgages, is what makes them non-conforming that they're not Fannie or Freddie financed?
That's a great point. I'm sorry for have glossed over that so quickly. 68% of the mortgages in Marin County are actually non-conforming, which is a very high amount and makes us an attractive market for PACE. And what that means, as you indicated, is that those are not mortgages that are backed by Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, and therefore not under the jurisdiction of FHFA.
I see, so and the reason that you say that's good is because it makes them available and not precluded by the other factors you talked about.
Right. So the background that I should be saying is that the FHFA has had somewhat of a standoffish approach towards these PACE assessments and has indicated that they're uncomfortable with the position of their security because mortgages are subordinated to a PACE loan. So as a result of that, some mortgages have provisions where if they're subordinated, the lender can pull the mortgage and require it get paid in full. We have not seen that in any PACE program to date, and there are over $400 million worth of residential PACE assessments in the state of California. What has happened on occasion is that when a home comes up for sale, the buyer can't get a mortgage until the PACE assessment is resolved at the time of sale. But this has only occurred in a very small percentage that has happened in the marketplace. So we
it's
don't want to inflate the risk, but we want to make sure that people are aware of the risk.
Right, so it's the subordination requirement that generates the friction in the circumstance.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Question. Alan Schwartzman, I'm in the mortgage business, my day job. So yeah, I understand the jumbo part, the non-conforming. So I'm assuming though that on the non-conforming lenders, it's going to be lender-specific as to whether or not they're agreed. Do you have any
This could be true.
statistics as to how many non-conforming properties have PACE involved now? And what does that translate to percentage-wise of lenders that seem to be going along and allowing this
I
coordination?
don't have that granularity of specifics, but I can say that from what's been happening across the state in California so far, and as I indicated, there is a significant amount of residential PACE activity happening. There hasn't been a mortgage that's been pulled. No lenders have exercised those covenants to actually pull the mortgage due to subordination.
Okay, I'm talking about, you're talking conforming and non-conforming?
Yes, this is
Okay.
statewide.
Okay.
So I don't have actually granularity within that data to know which of those are conforming versus non-conforming.
Okay.
I do know that in some instances, there have been reports of homeowners not being able to sell without the PACE assessment
Absolutely.
being dealt with. And my understanding is that those are with conforming mortgages, but I can't verify that. So I could talk to our neighbors in Sonoma to see if they have any more specific data. They tend
That's
to be
what
really
I've been
good about
hearing, it's the
providing that.
conforming mortgages that have been the issues, yeah. But I don't know how many non-conforming have PACE. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Yeah, Peter.
Yes, thank you. Peter Lax, Fairfax. Just so I understand the context here, the marketplace member is an entity that would actually administer the PACE programs. People would come to them and say, I'm interested, they walk them through the paperwork, get the approvals, et cetera. Okay, and then it didn't say any provision for how they're getting paid. Obviously, you know, they expect to get paid for their services. Is that going to be taken up in another item before the board, or
Sure.
how's that? Or generally, do you have any framework for how they would be compensated for their efforts?
So this agreement actually does not speak at all to any flow of funds between marketplace member or county. Generally, the way that those administrators, those marketplace members, cover their cost of operation is actually through the spread of interest rate on the financing. They tend to offer a financial product to participants, and then they usually attempt to bundle and sell those financing on the secondary market, and that spread in interest rate they can get between the secondary market and the primary participant is how they seek to cover their cost of operation. So there's no cost to the county or any of the individual cities for participating. In fact, there tends to be, in some cases, fees that actually go to the county to cover the cost of accessing the tax roll.
Interesting. And are we going to address that in a separate agreement?
So if there is that kind of provision, that would be brought up by each of the individual marketplace members. But this agreement doesn't refer to any flow of funds one way or the other.
Questions, comments? It's interesting to me how the marketplace has changed in the last couple of years.
Yes.
You know, we've been interested, certainly at the county, in getting these PACE programs in place and expanding the ability of people to participate. And there's been so much reluctance, but within this last year, with the providers suddenly coming on so strong, it's very interesting. Perhaps everyone suddenly realized we had such a high number of non-conforming loans, so the risk wasn't actually so great. But regardless, I think this is great that we're able to move forward. So thank you, Becky, for the time you put into this.
Sure. I have to say that I couldn't have done any of this without Dana Armanino. She's
I
been
know
putting
it.
a tremendous amount of effort into this as well. It's been a real collaborative
Sure of
effort.
it. You're a good team. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll make the motion then to approve resolution 2015-03 to establish Marine Clean Energy as the regional liaison for the PACE program and authorize our CEO to finalize and execute the agreement for collaborative services, PACE financing marketplace.
Second?
I'll second it.
And I'm not asking for public comment since we have no public. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. All right, next on our agenda, item number 6 is adjustment to MCE retirement plans.
We're going to be hearing from Jennifer Dowdell on this item.
Thank you. Good evening, Jennifer.
Hi, good evening. I looked at the agenda. It looks like there are many meeting things on the agenda, so I'm going to briefly summarize and then go to questions. So what we're requesting is really to delegate to the executive committee the ability to review and select some potential providers for the retirement plan. And we're asking that the board basically delegate that approval for the plan upgrades to the executive committee and direct staff to research the options and collate them and bring them to executive committee for discussion, review, and approval. And to give a little context, MCE's retirement plans altogether are approaching about $1 million. We have a 401A plan, which is employer contribution plan, and we have a employee contribution plan that is a 457B plan, and the total of those is coming close to $1 million. And in order to get kind of a standard plan provider like Fidelity or Schwab or some of the larger players, you really have to have $1 million in each plan. And as part of preparation for this, we talked to folks and we validated that. So that's the less than good news. The really good news is that MCE's plans are growing, and they're growing quickly. And we have some different options than we had at launch. And those include some different providers. Those include a better deal from our current provider nationwide. And what we're requesting is authority to basically secure some changes to the plan. And the upshot of those changes are, right now employees have fairly high cost loaded mutual funds as options. And their accounts pay all the administrative costs of the accounting associated with the back end of those funds, which is not what is always the case, and obviously something that the employees might prefer not to have. MCE also does not have an independent financial advisor. So an independent fiduciary does not work with us on review of fund selection or any changes to the mutual funds, and that would be best practice, and it would also substantially reduce MCE's risk as plan sponsor. What we're trying to do is to look at providers that will allow us to more completely customize the funds that we're offering, the lineup of mutual funds, and to just directly engage investment advisor. Based on indicative bids, the cost of making these changes would be de minimis to the plan overall, fairly small, and this is in the $0 to roughly $5,000 or $6,000 annual range, so a fairly small amount. The changes would increase MCE's costs above those amounts because MCE would take on the plan administration. There are a variety of providers, and basically it's a menu in terms of the extensiveness of plan support, the things like dividing up the plans and accounting for accounts separately on the platform. So there are a fair number of bells and whistles that can be assessed, and what we're asking is that we get approval to delegate the direct selection of those choices to executive. And that's my piece. So if there are any questions?
If you want to add something.
I was just going to invite any members of the executive committee to comment further if they wish to, that this was discussed in our executive committee as well.
We have a question from Ben here. Gary.
I do want to comment on this.
Comment, be great.
It's about the role of this whole thing. It just seems, this requires board approval, I understand. And so why not have the staff research opportunities, have the executive committee make a recommendation and have the board make the final decision? It seems like that. It seems kind of strange to go the other way around, but we just delegate it to the. I'm sorry, is that?
That is an option, and it doesn't seem like an unreasonable one to me.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no time sensitivity for this, and I think that the reason the recommendation is framed in this way is sort of the direction that the executive committee conversation went, which was, we don't quite have enough information yet. maybe we could make a decision at the next meeting. Maybe this is something that doesn't need to come to the full board, so we keep our board members, our board meetings more streamlined, but there's really no staff preference one way or the other.
Andrew McCullough, San Rafael. Excuse me. I have no problem with delegating the authority to the executive committee, and I think the staff report is well done, and the points are persuasive with one minor exception. And I'm speaking from experience as the plan fiduciary for my company's plan. My understanding, at least in the private sector, is that typically plan administration expenses are borne by the participants, so it's spread equally among the participants or pro rata. And the company typically doesn't absorb those expenses. You're proposing otherwise, that those expenses now are paid by MCE as a benefit to plan participants. I merely throw out there that it's a cost that's ultimately passed on to ratepayers, so something to consider. And I guess my suggestion is just to make sure that this is standard within whatever sector or industry MCE finds itself in, because it's not in the mid to small market private company sector.
That's an excellent point, and we can do further research and come back to you with that. One of the issues around the administrative costs is because MCE is so new and because a lot of the employees are fairly early on in their career, the accounts are small. And the combination of the load and the expenses.
Jennifer, could you associate yourself more closely with the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. The combination of the load in the fund lineup and the administrative expenses being borne by fairly small accounts was of concern. But I understand what you're saying, and we are happy to research that and bring that back. Thank you.
Greg, please.
Yeah, Greg Lyman, El Cerrito. I echo Gary's comments that it should be researched at the executive level and brought back to the board.
Alan Schwartzman, Benicia. I actually agree with that also. And have you done any research on other entities that provide NoLoad funds?
Yes.
And
So-
what have you looked at those? Has that come to the
Yeah, so
executive
Vanguard,
committee? Yeah.
we actually have had a discussion with. They're very interesting in that, and I don't want to take too much time, so just give me the hook if I get down the weeds too much. Vanguard provides no-load funds, and one of the ways to get at those funds is to have an independent administrator who provides a platform, and you fill up the platform with the funds you want. Vanguard does not perform plan administration, so they actually have some administrators that they work with in a very effective way, and we have contacted 2 of those.
So do you have information back to present as a comparison to Nationwide or some other
Yeah,
alternative?
actually, so we were going to tee that up, not tonight, but I can give you a flavor. So basically, the most expensive option is to go with a full service fiduciary and to go with a pretty full service administrator. If you go with a pretty full service administrator, then you get individual employee accounts accounted separately, and you get the 2 plans accounted separately, which would be an improvement over the back end that we have. Additionally, the platform is such that they provide literally a portal shell, and you fill that shell with the funds that you want. They can provide any fund from any broker-dealer that we would indicate, and there are other no-load funds, but the one I'm most familiar with is Vanguard, and when you think no-load, they come quickly to mind. So yes, we could use Vanguard funds on that platform. The more complete the administration and the more customizable the administration, the more flexibility we have as to how we fill that platform.
So I think it would be important to see some alternatives and some different cost variances to see what's most expensive, what we have now, a Vanguard or alternative. I think it's important.
Yes, and I completely understand. So what we did in basically researching this recommendation to decide even if we want to bring it forward is we inquired with two separate plan administrators. The universe is small because we have the 401A, and those costs range from roughly $4,000 to do the administration on an annual basis to something that is more like, just give me a moment. I'm happy to answer and give me the hook if I'm in the weeds. But in terms of plan administration, somewhere between $5,000 and $2,400 to do both of our plans. And the difference is the level of accounting customization on the back end. Additionally, we talked to two fiduciaries, and the range of costs there is about $4,000 to about $10,000 annually. And the differences come to things like, is the investment advisor going to meet with your employees on an annual basis and talk to them separately? Are they going to conduct group meetings to do education? What does the outreach look like? How are they going to engage in terms of developing a program to document the investment decisions that are made?
So my intent was not to get off into
Oh,
the
I'm
weed
sorry.
stuff.
I'm sorry.
I just, my intent was to echo the previous comments, and I personally would like to see comparisons come back so we can get an idea what we're really talking about. That's all.
And I think that was very much the intention that and very specific comparisons would be brought to the executive committee. And the only issue here tonight was whether the executive committee should be delegated the decision authority to be brought back to the board. And I'm hearing from this group, I think, Ford, did you want to say something before I go ahead, please?
Ford Green, San Anselmo. I agree with the other comments were made, particularly because now it's a sensitive issue and appropriately sensitive, I think, to make sure that there's an adequate amount of governmental review and those decisions don't get made relatively in private without the public's opportunity to review and participate. So I'm in full agreement that it would go
Executive committee meetings are open to the
first.
public.
I know
right?
they're open, but they're less available than general.
Yeah. Right, witnessed by our public here tonight. Yeah, Kevin.
Right. Just to echo those comments, I mean, having participated in this conversation at the executive committee, I think that's the intent. I think the direction of this conversation is absolutely appropriate. You just need to give that direction and get on with it.
Exactly.
Because it has to be done.
Would you like to make a motion?
What motion should I make now? What's a promise?
Well, that there will be further research and a menu of options brought to the executive committee, which will make a recommendation that then will be brought to the full board. That's what I hear to be the sentiment. So, or Gary, did you want to make that motion?
Yeah, why don't you make that motion?
Oh, okay, yeah. No, the motion would be that staff go ahead and research the opportunities. The executive board can do the detailed calculations and analysis and come up with a recommendation, but the board should have a final approval. And it might even be on the consent calendar if it's straightforward, but if there's some issues for discussion, fine.
And I actually amend that. I don't think it should be on the consent calendar. I think it should actually be on the regular agenda. We should consider it and address it, and I will second that motion so amended.
Okay, I'll approve that motion.
All right.
Will the maker of the motion state their name, please?
Gary Lyon?
And the seconder is Kevin Harrell.
All right, any further comments from the board? All in favor? Aye. Oh, any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, very good. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the grant from the San Francisco Foundation. Dawn, I'm
Yeah,
guessing
so-
this is yours.
Well, no. We
No.
have Shalini Swarup
Guessing
here,
wrong.
who's going to.
Shelley?
I think that's why you're here, Shalini. But I'm happy to talk about this if you want. It's a really exciting opportunity. Shalini did a lot of the work for it, so it wouldn't be completely fair for me to take the credit. How about I'll tee it up and you can answer any questions. That sounds good. Okay, excellent. So we've been very interested over the last year in engaging with the community on community choice aggregation in general, our expansion in new communities, and have developed a grassroots group called MCE Community Power, and we applied to the San Francisco Foundation to really extend and deepen the work of that group. And Shelly can kind of give you the details of it, but the San Francisco Foundation expressed an interest in the concept, and a group of our staff pulled together an application, had a couple of conversations with representatives from the San Francisco Foundation, and we received word a couple weeks ago that we were awarded a grant. And so we're very excited about the opportunity. The primary use of the grant funds, based on the application, would be to hire a community organizer to help coordinate the efforts of this group, and engage in some deeper analysis on how we can really strengthen the work of that group and strengthen our ties to that group. So Shalini, why don't you come on up and give us any more detail?
Yeah, if you look in your packet on page, 108, you'll see the mission statement of MCE Community Power, and it's really about focusing on marginalized constituencies and communities within our service territory. And there are 5 specific tasks that we're hoping the community organizer can take on, and those are all listed in the award letter on page 113, right at the top, well, actually right in the middle. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have at this point.
So I do have a question, Shalini. So the idea is that this community organizer would be available to work in all the various communities that are part of our service area, or is this targeted at a particular part of our service territory?
The San Francisco Foundation, unfortunately, has limited their grant activities to Marin County and Contra Costa County, and they do not consider Napa County and Solano County as part of their sort of area that they give grants in. So our hope is that the person would receive some supplemental funding from MCE to address needs from those communities.
Gotcha. Super. Other questions? Seeing none.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you, Tom.
Second.
Bud? And seconded by?
Oh, no. Oh, Lyman?
Mr. Cups. All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Yes.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? That's approved. Thank you very much. It's
Thank you.
great. It's always good to say yes to money coming in the door. Okay, item 8 on our agenda is the amended and restated power purchase agreements with Styon MCE Solar One, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be Greg. Yeah.
So as a part of the power purchase agreement we signed with Styon in March, for the board's authorization, because the project is being built in multiple phases, the finance partner of Styon requested that this PPA be split into 2 separate contracts so that as they came on in different timings, that they could still qualify for the tax credits that would be applied to each phase. So because of that, we've adjusted the PPA, splitting the transactions for 2 separate contracts. Nothing of significance, change in the terms, some minor clarifications, and then just the housekeeping issues of splitting the transaction into 2. We are sort of requesting authorization for the director to go ahead and sign the transaction. We're still waiting for some action items from Styon to get the project schedule up to speed. Waiting for authorization from Chevron to go ahead and move ahead with Styon as the developer. Chevron does have as part of our contract, the right to approve Styon as a developer and approve our development plan. So once those things are finalized from Chevron, then we'd like to go ahead and request that we alter the PPA or amend the PPA into 2 separate ones. Any questions or?
Are we concerned about falling behind schedule in any way? Has there been a delay we
do have
didn't
some concerns about-
anticipate?
I'm sorry?
Well, there's been a delay we did not anticipate.
There's been some issues with timing and moving the project forward to our original project schedule. We're about 2 months behind our original schedule at this point. We had a meeting with the developer today, and we've given them some very strict timelines to get the process moving forward, where we can still make the initial development of this year. So once those are made and Chevron actually approves their development plan, I think we're in good shape at that point. But we are about 2 months behind our original schedule at this point.
Great, thank you. Questions? Comments?
Peter Lax from Fairfax.
Yes.
The contract price itself is blank at this point. Is that going to be determined at some other date?
The contract is not, it has been determined, the contract price. We don't put that in the board packet because it is, while we're in negotiations, those are confidential. The PPA was technically approved in the last board package, so that number is available, and I'm happy to provide that to you.
And we have an update on the project if you want to run through that.
That'd be great.
Do we want to work on after?
It'd be good to do this first, then we can call questions.
So then just a quick update on the project to bring up to speed. Again, we've moved ahead with 2 separate interconnection agreements. One is for a 2 megawatt project. Is everyone familiar with the project? Do you need more background? I'll give you just a quick story. So Chevron authorized us or expressed interest in leasing about 60 acres of their refinery site in the city of Richmond. This is it's a brownfield site. It was a former landfill and also some fertilizer evaporation ponds or storage ponds that have been filled in. So the capped landfill portion of the project is about 25 acres and the landfill part is roughly 15 acres. So we're going to be developing single axis trackers on the first part of the project. You have is it clicking? Oh, sorry. Snuck it up on me. There we go. So the first phase of the project will be starting this fall. It's a 2 megawatt phase. This was part of the project was approved as part of Chevron's modernization program. It's actually a mitigation for their modernization program. So this has already been environmentally permitted. It was a 13-acre site that they originally proposed for their own project, but subsequently agreed to let us develop the project. That interconnection has been submitted. We've actually gone through what's called an independent study analysis. So the project is electrically independent from any other projects on the grid. So it has passed that phase. It's basically on the point of getting a draft agreement for the interconnection from PG&E. So we're very much close to finalization. I think the interconnection costs were roughly about $140,000, which for a 2 megawatt project is quite inexpensive. We've finalized the site boundaries. We actually physically went out to the site and identified all the areas where we need to avoid any infrastructure for the landfill. There's a groundwater monitoring system on the site that we need to avoid, and Chevron needs to have access to maintain. So all site structures will be outside of that. We've also excluded from the site any environmentally sensitive areas. There's a small berm where there's some native grasses that need to be maintained, and also there's a wetland area through the middle. And we've excluded that from the lease boundary entirely, so we'll not be responsible for any problems in those areas. That's strictly outside of our lease boundary. So at this point, once we get Chevron's approval, and this is why we're kind of holding off on finalizing the split PPA, we want to make sure that we get Chevron's approval on both Stion as the developer and on the development plan. And at that point, we'll go ahead and exercise our option to lease the property and then execute the lease for the property as well. That lease is $1 a year term. Chevron maintains the responsibility for any property taxes. The only thing we're paying for is the $1 a year rental. Groundbreaking is not an appropriate term. Obviously, this is a landfill site, so we're not actually breaking the ground. But we'll call it a ribbon cutting or something like that. It's probably not going to be happening in mid-July. We just found out this week. It's going to be happening more probably September. So then the 8.5 megawatt phase, this is 3.5 megawatts of single axis trackers and 5 megawatts of fixed array. The fixed arrays are going to be on the landfill site, so there will actually be no penetration of the landfill cap at all. These are basically ballasted structures that we fill with concrete, the frames sit on top, and then they can be adjusted for any settlement on the field. These are US-made manufactured panels. They're manufactured in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. We have an agreement with Richmond Build folks to provide at least 50% local labor. We've had several interested contractors willing to support the project, some from IBEW, some from other union folks as well that are interested. So we're working with them to get as much support as we can for the project. Again, site boundaries all finalized. This project, because the environmental laws don't like you to segregate the project or segment the project into multiple phases. So even though the first phase of the project is environmentally cleared, we're still including that land in an EIR, an Environmental Impact Report. That document should be finalized in the next couple of weeks, and that'll be published, and then subject to a 45-day comment period. And then we hope to incorporate those comments into the final EIR, and then publish the final draft, and then the timing of the groundbreaking or the dedication event, ribbon cutting, we want to coincide so that completion of the EIR is final, so that there's no public perception that we're moving ahead on a project that doesn't have the EIR completed. Again, we're hoping to exercise the site option in the lease in the near future, probably the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then the dedication event for the entire project is scheduled for a year from September, probably late fall of next year. And again, we're trying to get this project in the ground before the tax credits expire at the end of 2016. So it's critical timing for them. Again, why we're a little more concerned than we would normally be for any delays, because we have roughly 18 months to get this project done, and that's just about as much time as it'll take. Basic layout for the system, again, you can kind of see the area smears in the middle. There's some drainage swales that are being avoided, and also the berm that's being avoided as well. You see on the lower right, that's the structure. These are basically plastic tub structures, roughly 2 feet by 5 feet, that are placed on the ground and leveled, and then filled with concrete to support the project. This site is right at the intersection of Hensley Road. The green stripe there is actually the Bay Trail. The Bay Trail actually comes right up to the front of the site. We have roughly a 1 acre site right at the corner of that intersection where we have availability to do some sort of visitor center at some point in the future, if we so choose. So do you have any questions or comments?
Comments? No? Yes?
I'll make a motion
Sloan?
if nobody has anything else to say.
Fantastic.
Just one
Yeah,
question.
please, Kevin.
As part of the sequel process, are you doing a public hearing, or are you just?
There will be at least 2 public hearings in the process, yes.
Okay.
And those will take place in Richmond.
And how will they be noticed?
I'll have to talk to our consultants about that, but I think it'll be through a public notice. There is a public list that we've gotten from our environmental consultants that'll go out to. We've had a few folks that have requested to be added to that list as well.
Okay, terrific.
You should have all gotten notices, your agencies should have all gotten notices of the notice of preparation for the EIR.
Yeah, I was mostly asking about hearing. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Sloan, we had a motion. We have a second from Denise Ethis. All in favor?
Oh, wait, can I, I'm sorry, can I make a clarification on the motion?
Sure, Dawn.
I think because of the timing issues that have surfaced recently, what I'd like to suggest a slight adjustment to the motion that rather than approving the 2 agreements, that we authorize approval of the 2 agreements. And then we'll be able to execute, subject to CEO, what we'd like to do is wait until next week for them to meet a couple of milestones and then move forward at that time with the signature. So subject to
Sloan?
CEO approval.
You want to figure out how to amend your motion to make us all comfortable with that?
Yeah, that part, that's the here's what I will make a motion that we authorize our CEO to approve the 2 amended and restated power purchase and sale agreements with Stion MCE Solar 1 LLC, one in the amount of 2 megawatts, and the other 8.5 megawatts, using her best judgment.
Denise, second. All right. Very good. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Greg. All right. So it's time for our energy efficiency update. Becky.
The stuff I love to talk about. Hello again. My name is still Becky Menton, Director of Energy Efficiency. Just wanted to provide a general overview of how we're doing in terms of meeting our goals. What we have started to provide to you in each of your monthly board packets is a snapshot of our savings since we have launched our energy efficiency programs. As we've grown and been able to hire new staff, it's given us the opportunity to develop these lovely and aesthetically pleasing graphs that really, I think, tell a compelling story about what it's been like to be administering programs since we started. There's obviously a really clear ramp up, and we're really pleased with the momentum that we've gained, especially in the last 6 months or so on our program. So just one great thing to show before I dive into individual updates on each of them. So for the multifamily program.
Hold on, Becky. You got a question from Sloan?
Yeah, sorry. I heard the pause.
If I might just, why is it that there was such an uptick between January and February 2015? What happened?
January and February 2015. So I think if I could skip to the multifamily program, you'll see on the graph that there is that dramatic increase. And one of the things that I think this graph really demonstrates really well, and let's see if I can finally nail the laser pointer. Yes. So what you see here is that a lot of times multifamily projects take a really long time to implement, and then all of the savings hit all at once. So you'll see the example, like we had a very big project that hit our books in about September of 2013. So there was a slow ramp up, and then bam, we had that project. Slow ramp up through some smaller projects that we accomplished in the meantime, and then one major project that hit our books in December of 2015. So one of the things that we've really learned through implementing this program is that these multifamily projects in particular have considerable lead time, and often they require sort of a unique approach. Some projects, such as affordable housing projects, tend to have trigger points where these projects are recapitalized. They know they have access to funding at 15-year intervals, and they'll save major capital improvements for that point in time and then do a significant building-wide upgrade when they have access to those resources, which was the case with this project that we saw in December of last year. It was an affordable housing project undergoing a refinance. Other times, often in market rate properties, the property owner or manager will be very reluctant to disrupt their tenants. So they're more willing to consider phased approaches where they upgrade a unit at turnover rather than doing the comprehensive building in the entire time. So we've been working really hard as a program to try and accommodate these different types of applicants and have a solution for every property that comes in the door. This is something that we've really learned. It's a great question, though.
Well, I mean, so to read the first chart properly, what it really shows is that the multifamily has been great.
Yeah.
And that the aggregate savings looks great because of that improvement, right?
Not entirely. We can go back and you can see the contributions of each of the programs in terms of the color tranches. So the bottom tranche is the multifamily program, and it had a significant contribution to the program results in December. There's just one massive project, several hundred units in Richmond, and that's what that major jump is. But this entire contribution is from the small commercial program as well. The small commercial program actually is the single biggest contributor to our savings portfolio. We've had a lot of upgrades that have been done throughout Richmond and Marin. And so actually that one is the biggest number contribution overall. And then the single family program actually does have a pretty significant contribution, and in addition to that tends to be our most cost-effective program to implement. So they all have their unique, I love all my children equally, I guess I should say. Most of the time. Some of the things worth mentioning about the multifamily program while we're on here, since we started the program, we've audited about 52 properties throughout our service territory and distributed $180,000 worth of rebates. This one particular project that hit our books in the January timeframe was a $50,000 rebate. So that alone was just a really big chunk of our program savings. Some other metrics that are worth pointing out about the multifamily program, we've at the incredible and ongoingly fabulous leadership of our executive officer, have started to institute quarterly goal tracking among each of our programs so we can really make sure that we're on the right point and that we're directing resources in the right areas. And what we've found through tracking in the multifamily program is that from the top line, you can see the amount of properties we've assessed this year, in 2015, 26 properties we've assessed this year. Our program goals for the entire year are 20. So we've done a great job in terms of reaching out to properties. And I mentioned at the last board meeting where I was able to come and give a presentation that in large part this has a lot to do with our ongoing collaboration with the Marin Municipal Water District. We've been continuing to work with them. They often will have grant money to have faucet aerators and shower heads, which can reduce consumption of water when you shower by like half or sometimes more. But they don't have rebate dollars to actually install that equipment. So they need to leave it in their offices for people to pick up and hope that those people will then take the next step to install it. So we work with them to actually take that equipment, and when we go through and do a multifamily property audit, we'll install those shower heads and faucet and aerators. We get the energy savings because that's heated water that we're saving, and they get the water savings because obviously in some properties it's been a 20% decrease in water consumption just from those two measures. So this has really resulted in a really positive collaboration between our two agencies. And as a result, they've started to get a lot of properties that are interested in saving water, and they've referred them to us to go through our actual energy efficiency program track as well. So that has just been a really positive relationship. And as a result of that, we have already hit our pipeline in terms of the number of projects that we have in the queue. Also, what you'll see is that the savings projections for that multifamily program are really, really positive. So our goals are 345,000 kilowatt hours. We're looking at about 260,000 in the pipeline. That's 76%. And our therm savings goal is 29,000 with 26,000 in the pipeline. And in addition, we've achieved 18,000 already. So we're looking at 114% of our therm goals. However, what's important to note about that is that these are projects that are in the pipeline. So the emphasis of our program in the next several months is really going to be on converting those projects, on getting commitments to signed rebates and actually getting the project done before the end of the calendar year so that we can report those savings and have them count against our cost effectiveness metrics. So that's been a big part of this. One final note for multifamily. We did find in the past several years of implementation that we were having a bit of attrition in the program. We have this really beautiful report that we provide, this really valuable technical assistance that we give property owners at no cost, and people would get an audit, they would get that report, and then we would never hear from them again. And as soon as they got that report, we'd have a very hard time getting them to follow up. So we've done a few things to try and address that. One is that we're actually requiring a good faith deposit from properties before we move forward with the audit process. So in order to get that technical assistant out on the property, we request a check and a signed form. Now, if the property goes all the way through the pipeline, we actually reimburse them the cost of the deposit at the time of the rebate. So the rebate is still no cost if you complete the project. But if you don't, there are provisions that allow us to cash that check. We were concerned that that would actually be a disincentive to some property owners, but we found that it hasn't been. So the truth will be in implementation to find out if that actually results in projects that actually do have skin in the game and do move through the pipeline. So that's been a lesson learned so far. One of the things we thought would be interesting to show you is just the breakdown of where the properties are that we have in our pipeline right now. So I think many of you have the presentation in front of you. You can take this home, and if you're interested, let us know. Don't think we can necessarily share customer participation information, but we can always reach out, and if a property is interested in working with the counselor or something, we can see if we can make that connection. We like to give our participants good PR. So the multifamily, the commercial program update. As I was saying, the commercial program has continued to show just a steady increase and a steady rate of savings. One of the things that we have found in the small commercial program, however, is that capturing therm savings have been very difficult. So therms are the metric that we use to quantify natural gas. Whenever you cook, whenever you heat your home, or whenever you heat water in your home, often those are natural gas-based appliances. And it's a major target of ours to upgrade those appliances because they have good greenhouse gas contributions, and they tend to be the deep energy savings, which are really good to couple as a whole building project. One of the major challenges, there's sort of two major challenges actually in the small commercial sector that make it very difficult for us to get those therm savings. One of which is that often those therm equipment, the natural gas burning equipment, tends to be owned by the landlord, and we operate primarily in tenant-operated spaces. These small commercial spaces are the mom-and-pop grocery stores or convenience stores that you see, retail outlets, and et cetera, where the tenants who are paying the bills actually don't have ownership control over the equipment. This is something I've talked about a lot here. It continues to be a major barrier. However, we have started to make some inroads in accessing the building owners and getting some HVAC-related projects on the table. And when we actually brought those projects forward, what we found was that code has increased so significantly that the savings that we're able to claim for our projects that have to be above code sometimes diminish completely, to the extent that we actually have no window left over to claim those savings. And so that's been a real challenge for us moving forward as well. However, we can get significant gains on the electric side for that. So that's something that we're continuing to look at. And you'll note that this program has negative therms, and that's a really interesting point that I want to address. Incandescent lighting is 75% less efficient than CFLs and even more so than LED. And where is that excess energy going when you turn on an incandescent bulb? Often it is released as heat into your property. So one of the things that they've noted in California through implementing lighting programs in particular is that when you replace an incandescent bulb with a CFL bulb, it can sometimes have an alternate effect of an increase in heat use in the property, because the heat that you were getting from those light bulbs is no longer influencing the comfort of the space, and people have been turning up their HVAC systems to accommodate for that. So it's a really kind of interesting effect, and I love all my children equally, but I do wish that this particular child wasn't dragging down our multifamily program results with the therm. So we still continue to try and find strategies to address that really hard to reach sector. But some metrics that I think tell a really good story. We've audited over 2,400 businesses throughout the Marin and Richmond area, which is a very significant amount, and have distributed $180,000 worth of rebates over 169 projects. Again, this is inception to date, not since 2015, but the numbers continue to build. Just last month alone, I think we got 50,000 kilowatt hours. That's pretty significant. So our single-family program. I've mentioned this before, but one of the things I like to reiterate is that the savings for the single-family program primarily come through something called a home utility report. For this, we actually mail to customers a little one-page or two-pager that shows them how much energy their home uses compared to a comparable neighbor. When we say a comparable neighbor, what we do is we take a number of homes within the same zip code that have similar characteristics. In order to get that information, what we've done is we take account information, which we get through energy usage, and we combine that with assessor data. So we have an idea of how many square feet the property has, so we can match properties of similar size and square footage. And then based on that information, we can compare homes that are comparable and say, gosh, you're using 20% more energy than your neighbor. And what we've seen is that just providing customers with this information generally results in a 2% reduction in energy usage. What we do is we record those as we send them. The assumption is that they get the mailer, they reduce usage, not they continue to reduce usage over time. So you'll see that these jumps and drops in our energy usage relate to the months that we treated folks. And as we've started to get a more continuous system in line, those savings have started to become cumulative. But that doesn't have the same build that you see in the other programs because it's not cumulative savings, it's savings when they receive those mailers. So it's just helping you understand the dynamics of how that works. Overall, this is also tied to our web tool program. Our web tool, myenergytool.mcecleanenergy.com. I'm going to ask you to write that down in a second. And what we are really trying to do is get people to open an account on that tool. Once they do, they can actually claim their account. And what we've done is we've sort of created an account for every user in our service territory, which connects their energy usage with their home profile information that we mentioned before. This allows property owners to conduct an online energy assessment, get connected to recommendations of what they can do to reduce energy, and then can actually take them the next step in terms of connecting them to a contractor database that we have. About 30% of the site visits we get are actually to search that contractor database. Rebate database, so you can see what financial support is available. And then one of the big things that we've launched in the last 6 months is a financing marketplace as well. So in that financing marketplace, it shows you, based on your action plan, what financing tools are available which can support your specific project that you have in mind. So it shows you for PACE, for example, you can finance your toilet replacement, whereas some other opportunities like a solar PPA or a solar lease only apply to the solar that you'd be considering. But it's a pretty cool tool. In our metrics, we're trying to get as many accounts created as we can and action plans where people actually say, I'm going to do these things to save energy in my home. And then we've distributed about 186,000 home utility reports. Those are going to about 17,000 customers in our service territory. So one of the things that we're really excited about with our single family tool is that pretty soon we're going to roll out a mobile app so that you can't just access it on your computer, but you can also walk around with your phone and maybe you go to a store and you're like, oh, what was I supposed to get to save energy? Oh, an LED light bulb. And then you can go to the store and get that LED light bulb. So we're pretty excited about that opportunity. But before we roll it out, we wanted to get an opportunity for each of the board members to be part of our peer review group. So it's a call to an action plan. What we were hoping we could convince each of you to do, if you haven't already, is actually go onto that tool and start an account for yourself and give us feedback about how you think it works, how you think it doesn't work. And so one more time, I'm going to give you that URL. It's myenergytool, all one word, .mcecleanenergy.org. So myenergytool.mcecleanenergy.org. And I hate to disappoint all of you who are super excited, but if you're not in Marin or Richmond, you might have to wait a week because we're just updating the assessor profile with the energy use account. That connection should be happening within next week. So we can follow through with an email to let everybody know it's available in all your service territory. You may also be getting an email from Alice Stover on our team to actually request some feedback from you. So keep an eye out for that. We'd love your participation. We'd love your support. And next month, hopefully, our action plan metrics are increased by 17. So finally, again, just in terms of tracking our progress towards achieving our goals this year, What we found is in terms of Q1 to Q2 goals, we're doing pretty good. We're at about 30% of our electric goals and 42% of our kilowatt hour goals. Our progress towards annual goals is 14 and 20% relatively, kilowatt hour and therms. And again, we're finding really positive traction in that pipeline, but the commitment is going to be getting those projects to convert and actually making sure that we can get those projects on the books. Final pieces that I wanted to leave you with, the 2016 program update. As many of you have heard, the CPUC is moving towards a 10-year rolling portfolio cycle. We're really excited about this. We think it opens the door for some really exciting opportunities with program design. And we're so excited that we're trying to jump the gun and get our program proposal in before any of the other administrators, also in part so that we can stake our claim and request that those administrators work around us instead of the direction we were given in 2013, which we think will be really positive. We've actually been working with Portrero Group, a consultant who is based locally in the San Rafael area, which has been great, to help us prepare that business plan. We're anticipating bringing that final draft for the June board meeting. Just a little heads up, you're going to get the content in your packet, but the final polished glossy will come at the board meeting because we won't have time to actually render it and make the document look beautiful before the board meeting, but we want to make sure you have time to review the content. So that should be forthcoming. Also, we're going to be on Tech and XCOM this month to provide some of the background information about the technical updates, the process we've gone through there, and give folks a preview for that as well. Another exciting thing that happened over the past 4 months is a low-income pilot proposal that we submitted to the CPUC. We've been really interested in seeing if there were ways that we could offer more services to the income qualified folks that live in our service territory. As I've mentioned for our multifamily program, at this point, about 70% of the properties that come through our pipeline are actually income qualified properties. And a lot of times they have very limited capital reserves around what they can do if they aren't at that refinance trigger. So as a result, what we're looking at is seeing if we can access the low income funds, which are administered through a separate portfolio at the CPUC than the energy efficiency funds, and leverage our multifamily program to provide a deeper incentive for income qualified properties. So for those projects that come through our pipeline that are income qualified, we would provide more financial support for them than for the market rate properties. Some other components of that portfolio, we're looking at a fuel switching proposal. This is supported by the governor's goals. Recently, the governor made a statement in his State of the State that he wanted to see cleaner heating fuels used in the state of California. Natural gas, as I mentioned, is the primary heating fuel that's used to heat homes and conditioned spaces. And what we're really interested in seeing is if we can pilot switching to heat pumps or other electricity-based forms of heating and cooling, which enable renewable integration, where you can't have it with a natural gas-based equipment. Another really neat thing that we want to pilot is whether or not switching the fuel source in that case can resolve health and safety considerations. Often when you go into a multifamily building in particular, if there is a natural gas wall furnace, you have to be concerned about backdrafting in the appliance, particularly if you tighten the building envelope, such as with window upgrades or insulation upgrades. And that alone, just doing the testing to see if there's backdrafting or mitigating those health and safety concerns can be a considerable cost. So we think incorporating that cost can make it more cost effective to switch the source of the fuel to something that allows for more renewable integration, making it really a triple win. Another thing we're considering is alternative enrollment criteria. Some of the existing low-income programs require fairly invasive enrollment processes. They go door to door and ask participants to provide income qualification information, sometimes including social security numbers, and sign a paper before they can participate in the program. And we think that's causing a deterrent, particularly in places where there may be language barriers. So we're going to try and use proxy enrollment criteria, such as looking to see if there's a certain population that speaks a foreign language as their primary language at home, or for another example, subsidized school lunches. If there's a certain area or region that has a lot of subsidized school lunches, we think that'll be a good proxy for the fact that they're likely low-income populations. So we're looking at using those as well and piloting if those increase participation. On the single-family side, part of moving to the web tool is to see if we can use that as a great way to encourage low-cost or no-cost improvements that save people money in low-income settings where they might not have as much dollars or capital to invest in their homes. And a really interesting concept that we're hoping to pilot is something called a match energy savings account. The concept here is for every dollar that you save on your utility bills, we'll put $2 in a match energy savings account to really increase the wealth and allow an opportunity to build up those dollars and use them for further energy saving improvements, such as an appliance replacement, something along those lines. So hopefully we get traction at the CPUC for this. We had a pretty good breakneck effort to get this in. We had a sort of a limited window to put this proposal together, but managed to get a number of letters of support and feel hopeful that this will be fruitful for us. So with that, I would love to accept any questions.
So Becky, I have a question. Can you do the similar chart that you did for multifamily and the property locations? Can you do that kind of a chart for commercial and single family as well? It'd be interesting to know what our geographic distribution is of current participants.
Absolutely.
Questions? Comments? Ray, did you have a...
Just a comment, actually. I've been, tracking this for now the couple of years I've been on this board, and I'd just like to say that, from my vantage point, there's been a tremendous change in how you track, forecast, all of the tools you put in place. It's really very impressive. So.
Well, thank you. The staff that we've been able to bring on board has made it so much more possible for me to do more. You can see our projections have increased with the staff that have come on board as well. So obviously, again, I'd have to defer to Megan and Alice and our team. But I appreciate that.
Other comments or questions? Yeah. Peter?
Grateful to see so much emphasis on energy efficiency ever since Amory Levin's coined the term negawatts. Every watt of energy you save is a watt of energy you never have to produce. So it's just really exciting to see that this vision is being implemented for real in a very substantive way. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that point. And I also love to point out that it makes it easier for us to achieve 100% renewable for all of our customers when we have to buy less electricity to get there.
Yeah, Brad.
I'm Brad Wagon Connect from Napa. And just, can you send that link?
Yes, that's a great suggestion.
Of my energy tool.
Great suggestion.
And on that, so I logged into that, or I posted that up, and it was asking for account information. Is that specific to the property, or can we do parallel accounts to our property one?
I would recommend that you put in your address, your home address, and then it'll actually pull up on Google Maps, like your house, and it'll import the assessor information associated with your house. And while possibly creepy, what's also really nice about that, what's also really nice about that is that it streamlines the amount of data you have to enter about your property. So we make certain assumptions about the age of equipment in your house, about the level of insulation in your house based on the year that it was built, and whether or not you filed a permit for work that you've done with the permit office. All of that is actually included in assessor information. So it streamlines the amount that you have to do to get an accurate online assessment.
But is it the account that I've used to go deep green, or can I use a parallel account?
That's a great question. I know years ago we actually connected the two, but because you're in El Cerrito, I'm not sure if we've refreshed that connection since the new communities have come on board. So I'll have to double check about that. It's a great question, though.
Any other questions or comments? I see none. Thank you, Becky. That was really great. Good presentation. All right, and now it's time for regulatory and legislative updates. Beth.
Good. I do prefer walking and talking, actually. So the regulatory arena has been incredibly busy, as has the legislative arena. Shalini is here. She's been manning most of our legislative work up in Sacramento. I'm doing something a little bit different just visually this time. And in general, even though I wish everybody researched the CPUC regulatory process in their spare time, I thought it may be helpful to just lay out what that process is at each meeting. And so after this meeting, I would love to get feedback from folks to see if this is a helpful tool for you, just so folks understand where we are in every proceeding. So, how close are we to the end? So just in general, when a proceeding launches, you'll either have an application or rulemaking. Next, you sort of have a policy discussion over, okay, what's the general trajectory of this proceeding? Then you go into facts, testimony, what are the facts associated with these specific proposals? Then we go into briefing. so the law, and then the commission issues a proposed decision, and that goes out for comment. Everybody comments on it, and then you have a final decision, and then you go into implementation. So that is an oversimplified but hopefully helpful view of what happens at the CPUC. So we'll give this a trial run for this meeting. One of the things that we have not been active participants in, but we have been actively watching, is the residential rate proceeding at the CPUC. This is going to be a major overhaul to what residential rates are going to look like for all of our customers into the future. And the reason why we haven't been that heavily involved is the generation rates are basically staying the same. It's all of the other components on the bill that are changing. And so it's just important for folks to understand what those changes are. So as people have questions about their energy bills, you sort of know where this came from. And so this is in the proposed decision state. So this has been a very long proceeding, and we're nearing the end. So first, one of the biggest changes relates to time of use rates. And so folks who have solar, many people who have solar are on time of use rates. And in general, time of use rates have reflected peak times of usage of electricity. And so in the past, that has really been kind of in the middle of the day, which is coincident with solar production. So when you have solar on your roof, it's very financially beneficial, right? Because you are producing energy at the highest cost times of day. Well, that's changing with how the loads are changing in the state of California. Now the coincident peak of usage is in the late afternoon and early evening. So this 4 to 9, around this 4 to 9 time period. So the idea is eventually these other time of use rates that have daytime peaks are going to shift into the evening. And so that's going to have a very significant impact on folks who have solar on their rooftops. So that is a proposal that's before the commission, and it looks like it will probably be adopted. So those are significant changes impacting solar customers in particular. Another
Is that impact anticipated to be negative?
Significant negative impacts for folks who have rooftop solar.
Because the rates for that time slot will go up.
Right, and so the more expensive times of day are going to be in that 4 to 9 p.m. time period, when everybody gets home and turns on their lights and the solar's no longer producing. It makes interesting opportunities, though. For example, we just launched a partnership with Tesla for their Powerwall storage. So if you can pair your solar system with like a Powerwall, then you can charge your Powerwall and release it at night when you get home when the rates are the highest. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunities there too, and I think it's going to be sort of unique time. There are a lot of other major changes that are happening here. First, there's going to be a reduction to the CARE discount. So the CARE is the low-income subsidy for energy. So there is a discount on low-income customers' bills. That discount would be reduced. Also, another key difference is that the number of tiers is going to be reduced. So right now we have 4 tiers, and the idea there is you have low cost for your first kilowatt hours used, and then if you use a lot of electricity, you get up higher into higher tiers. So those tiers would actually be flattened out. So your first kilowatt hour of electricity is going to be a little bit more expensive, and if you're a high user of electricity, your cost is actually going to be lower. So this has been a challenge before the commission because it does not send a strong conservation signal. Another proposed inclusion here is a change to the minimum bill charges. And this also has an impact on folks who use solar. It means that there's a certain amount of negative charges that you wouldn't be able to receive. And then the one area that we've been involved in is the prohibition on zero minimum bill provisions, which is actually a little bit more technical than I'm going to go into right now, but that has been our small involvement and our small win. So actually, maybe I'll just pause here for now because this is this is going to be impacting people's bills. And I don't want people to think, oh, overnight this is all going to change. This is about a 4-year plan to transition to these different rate structures, eliminating the different time of use rates, and just transitioning to overall a much different structure. Another proposal is to have sort of a fixed charge for your distribution costs instead of variable costs. So you kind of pay a little bit more of like a lump sum for just having an account than having that sort of conservation effect layered into the tiers.
So
for
Beth,
that.
can I ask you a question? I
course.
understand we were not involved in all these different components
Right.
of the proposed changes, but do you have an understanding of why it was considered to be a good idea to reduce the care discount and otherwise increase bill charges for care customers in particular?
I think in general, there was a sense that those subsidies were sort of out of alignment with what had originally been envisioned. But again, I wasn't, we weren't really involved in that one.
Okay.
And just so folks have a sense, when we see that there are areas where maybe we don't need to chime in, we generally take a step back. So for example, in this proceeding, there are a lot of ratepayer advocates that are involved, a lot of solar entities that are involved. So, our voice wouldn't necessarily have, made much of a difference. So.
I'm sorry.
Alan wanted to ask a question, then we'll come right back over there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Alan Schwartzman, Benicia. Would it be fair to say that the care customers are going to get a double hit? If their discount's going down and the tier, it's 2 tiers and tier 1 is going up, they're getting hit twice?
Yes, I would say that's accurate. I would say that there are several hits. There's the decrease, say you're a low usage care customer, I would see 3 primary hits. The first hit would be that your care discount, the overall percentage, that discount is going to be reduced. The second hit that I would see is with the changing of the tiers, if you conserve a lot of energy, this is going to have more negative impacts on folks who have conserved a lot, and the outcomes are going to be better for people with high energy usage. So I would see that as the secondary hit. And then the third hit, I would say, is by transitioning to a minimum bill charge or a set cost for distribution, just the idea that there's some flat cost for you to just have a meter and be connected to the grid, that would be a third cost.
Bob?
So and just in to give a more complete perspective, there are a lot of fixed costs that relate to transmission and distribution, and so from a pure rate design perspective, it does make sense to sort of transition to this. Your variable costs are the electrons, and your fixed costs are the assets that you have on the street, but it is a very big policy change.
Bob?
Bob McCaskill. As you pointed out, the changes both to the proposed changes both to the tier level and the time of use is going to have a negative impact on solar uses. Do you have any sense for how strongly not only the solar industry but the Sierra Club and other several organizations are going to try to fight these proposed changes?
Yeah, there has been pretty vehement opposition to this, and I think the folks who have solar on their rooftops at this point have, there's a subsidy that's happening based on the change of, how can I put this in more simplified terms? The solar customers are receiving a subsidy insofar as the time of use rates are not aligned with the most expensive points in time that we need hours, the new peak.
Yep.
That's exactly right. So, and yeah, Sean.
the CPUC instituted this rulemaking as per AB 327, which was a Perea bill that passed last year. So there was pretty strong opposition from the Solar Energy Industries Association, the Sierra Club, the Natural Resources Defense Council. A lot of ratepayer advocates were all opposed to this bill, and it passed, and that's why the CPUC is making a lot of these changes as well.
That's helpful. Ford?
Thank you, Shalini.
I'm Ford Green, San Anselmo. Going back to the reduction of the care discount and the increase of the minimum bill charges, part of your response, you said that you thought the rationale for doing that was that where those care costs are now are not in line with what was originally envisioned or something like that. And so what my question is do you know envisioned by whom?
Now, this sort of goes back into the recesses of my brain, and Shalini can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. But just in general, what they had said was during the energy crisis, they put in some protections for care customers and said, okay, care customer rates can only go up by so much percent of each year, but electricity costs went up significantly, outpaced that by quite a bit. And so the original sort of discount percentage ended up.
The ratio between the
That's
two.
right. And so originally the discount was much smaller on a percentage basis, but then as energy costs rose, it became a much bigger percentage.
I see.
And so
it's catching up, as it were.
that's right. I mean, yeah, that's right. So I don't have the percentages.
No,
at hand,
that's
so
fine. I
how
have
close
the
it was.
concept and the idea, and that's helpful.
Mhm.
A practical thing with respect to your flow chart,
Yeah.
charts, oftentimes, or probably most of the time, people assume that other people see reality the same way one does. You're dealing, at least with me, with a relatively older person that has bad eyesight.
Yeah, we can't see,
We can't
see
see
them at
the
all.
small
We can't
print.
read them.
Okay.
And especially when you have gray on gray like the next
can't
one,
read 'em.
then
Okay.
it's like forget it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
bold and bigger, please.
Yes, thank you, Ford.
Big
That's
and
for sure.
bold.
Big and bold.
And lots of contrast. Okay, I will.
Right, and lots of
Yeah,
contrast.
lots of
I will definitely take that feedback.
Thank you for the confidence that you have in our eyesight, but it's misplaced. Is what he meant to
Assuming
say.
it's
I'll
just
work on
as good as hers.
Exactly.
But just I guess touching on that is this sort of helpful for?
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Okay, great. Then we'll make some revisions.
And
And
but
pe-
also, if you could include this stuff in our board packets, because
Yeah,
it's
that's the plan going
we
forward.
actually do review this stuff, and so in
Yeah.
reviewing it, when you're not under the gun trying to keep up with the presentation and get through a meeting, it's, at least as to me, it's more likely to stick.
Yeah, and you'll see a couple of graphics coming forward that are going to be included in future board packets. So this
But
was
before you go there, Peter has a question.
yes, sir.
When are these rates going to be implemented, do you anticipate? And as someone who has solar panels on my roof, I'm wondering which time of use rate is most advantageous?
Right. Okay. So on this table, you'll see that there is they're basically closing certain. They're going to close the Res 7 and Res 8 currently are closed to new customers, and currently Res 6, which is equivalent to our E6 rate, is still open to new customers. That one, with this decision, E6 would be closed, and over a 5-year period, those folks would be transitioned to the ETOU rate. Yeah, that's the top one.
Take advantage of the E7 and E rates, or are those disadvantageous?
Yeah, so the E7 and E8 rates are closed. The Res 8 rate has been closed to new customers for a very long time. Res 7 was closed a couple of years ago, and those are, for Res 8, which has been closed for a long time, those are going to have an immediate transition to the new ETOU rate. And then the other rates would be on a 5-year transition plan to the new ETOU rate.
If you installed your solar several years ago, you may be on E7 or E8, and if so, then you're lucky. Stick with that. Yep. I think I don't know if it's good news or not, but there's not really a choice to be made. So if you are on one of those existing rates, you probably want to stay put. If you're on E6, you don't have the option of going to anything else, and so there really aren't any better alternatives than what you have.
And one thing I would just note is there are actually a surprising number of net energy metering customers that are on the E1 rate, which is just a flat rate, which under the current tariffs is not at all the cost-effective, cost-conscious way of making the most of your solar. Most net energy metering customers are on E1. Yeah, even though it wouldn't actually be logical to be on that rate. Yeah, Director Lyon.
Gary Lyon. I just got the solar on the roof, but I am E7.
Great.
When we talk about a 5-year transition, does that mean somewhere in the 5 years or at the end of 5 years we'll transition? Is it a gradual changeover or is it at the end?
What I would assume is for each of the general rate cases, there's going to be revisions to E7 to make it closer to the ETOU rates. So that's actually a very good and very probably more complicated question than I can answer right now.
Oh, the other question, you mentioned the Tesla in-wall battery. Is there any way to use the Tesla car battery? So I have a Tesla in the garage that I can charge it during the daytime, and then can I feed back off of that and power the house?
Yeah, I mean,
just get another cord going the other direction.
Yeah,
somehow.
I know that that is, those are pilots. The feeding back onto the grid is something that is currently being piloted, is my understanding, but it hasn't hit deployment. And I would say either maybe Greg would have more information on that, or Dawn.
Yeah.
Dawn can have.
We actually are having a presentation by the one company we've been able to identify in California that is testing that technology. It's not currently possible to do that with your Tesla or any EV, but there is a company that's testing that capability in Los Angeles at a military base, and they're coming up to give a presentation at our next technical committee meeting. So you'll be able to learn about it there, and hopefully we'll be able to find out what is the expected trajectory for getting that actually rolled out for use in the public. I expect it's years away.
Thank you.
Great. So I will start moving more quickly. These are the graphics, Director Sears, that will be in our board packet and in our summaries going forward. That have an indication of where everything is, and I can
actually read them.
I can try and make these bigger. It's actually hard to fit all those words in a single point.
Yeah, we're good. I think this is the size we like.
Okay, great. I can use this for the board also.
Bigger. You still want
bigger? Okay.
Oh, thanks, Kevin.
Noted. I'll leave that fight to the rest of you. So the next one that I'll talk about is the green tariff shared renewables. This is the tariff option that PG&E is going to be launching, and that is similar to our local Sol type of product. So basically, it comes from a source or various sources of products, and is a green, 100% green option for PG&E bundled customers. And so one complicated thing about the CPUC is they break proceedings into phases. So in one phase, they're going to be launching this new opportunity for customers. And separately, they are still working on some outstanding policy issues. And so I'm going to talk about those two items. From an implementation standpoint, we've had a lot of heartburn over this PG&E proposal. What they are proposing in their advice letter, which is how you implement a decision, they are proposing a streamlined bill presentment. And so what they're proposing to do is that these customers are going to have to pay the PCIA, power charge indifference adjustment, just like our customers. What they're planning on doing is kind of burying it into a single buried rate. And so when customers come to us, they say, what is this charge on our bill? It's pretty big. these are questions fielded by our account representatives and by our call center. Those are questions that PG&E really isn't going to have to answer. There's also a couple of issues related to time of use values. This is how the rate is calculated, and also there is a cost related to basically the PG&E green tariff rate is a subsidized product. So these customers basically only have to pay for the electrons. They don't have to pay any overhead costs associated with PG&E running their generation operations in general or any of their company overhead. So basically all of those costs that are generally borne in the generation rate are going to be borne by non-participating customers. And so to us, that's caused a lot of heartburn, because how can a 100% green CCA compete with a subsidized product? That fully loaded product would be, you can't compare apples to apples if one of them is a subsidized product. So those are the issues that we are working on in the implementation process. And the phase 4 is raising a lot of interesting questions as well. The first is a rate design question: is these overhead costs, this subsidy, when should that subsidy end? And in our view, it shouldn't be there to begin with. So really the answer for us is it should be soon. Also, a question is, how does the care discount apply to people who are on the GPSR rate? So those are two track issues. And another issue that is going to be, that will be very interesting to participate in, is currently there is no methodology for calculating greenhouse gas emissions of retail sellers of electricity. So the electricity that we provide to our customers, the electricity that PG&E provides to their customers, there's no set methodology. We just use best practices. And so here what they want to do is they want to set a specific methodology for retail electricity products. And so that would be applicable to all CCAs, to direct access providers, to all of the investor-owned utilities. So we will be participating there. But again, that is kind of in this beginning policy phase, and we are going to have months and months to go in that phase of the proceeding. Do you have any questions? Okay. Sorry, this is... another key proceeding that we're involved in right now is the low-income proceeding. This is in the testimony phase right now. And so our two core issues in this proceeding are seeking funding for our low-income tenants and families program that Becky referenced, and separately, a new issue in this proceeding that just got kicked over from a different proceeding is the question of whether care customers should be paying the PCIA, and that's the exit fee that PG&E charges to customers who leave their service and begin receiving CCA service. And so I'll just go in a little bit into this. In the proceeding, well, let's not deal with a lot of the weeds. So this is just an overview of what the PCIA is. So I just want to show you what this means for care customers, this PCIA issue. This is a non-care customer, so sort of you'd say a normal customer, and then a low-income customer. So these are the costs on an average customer's bill. So what you'll see is everybody pays, both MCE and PG&E customers pay the same for their distribution costs, and then PG&E and MCE each separately charge their generation costs, and then PG&E charges this PG&E exit fee to MCE customers. And so, that represents over 5% of a customer's bill for a non-care customer, and it represents about 10% of a bill for a care customer. And so, the interesting issue here is PG&E is the only investor-owned utility that charges the PCIA to care customers. So SCE and SDG&E do not. Furthermore, no investor-owned utility charges the PCIA to medical baseline customers. So that's also another sort of specially treated group. So basically, most vulnerable customers get special treatment. That is sort of the overall rule. And so what we are arguing is that this is not an appropriate means of collecting ratepayer revenues. Those exit fees should not be charged to our most vulnerable customers. SCE, through an advice letter, has just requested that they also be able to charge PCIA to their low-income customers. And it is not a surprise that Lancaster just launched, so they're the most recent CCA, and around over 40% of their customers, I think it's 44% of their customers, are on care rates. So, the impact is significant. Yes, Director Harroff.
Just, again, Kevin Harroff from Larkspur, what is the justification that's offered by the utilities for doing that?
Yeah, so the justification relates to how the discount, what does the care discount mean? Does it mean that you just get the care discount, or you get the care discount and you pay or not pay the PCIA? But in our view, it's something that needs to be brought up in a proceeding. The commission has agreed, and they've kicked it over into the low-income proceeding for analysis.
And I would just add, I mean, the justification for the PCIA or exit fee in general is to make the utility whole for purchases they made on behalf of the customer before they departed. And so it's unclear whether PG&E, if they were not charging care customers, if they would then bundle that same number and increase the charges to remaining non-care customers. It's unclear how Edison is doing it as well. So there's not a uniform approach, obviously, being used, and we're just concerned about the impacts on low-income customers.
No, absolutely. And I guess the reason I asked that question was because of the difference between PG&E, current difference between PG&E and the other investor-owned utilities. How is that justified when the other investor-owned utilities don't do it? And at least until other folks like us have raised the specter of doing what we do in their service areas, that hasn't been a problem.
Yeah, I think, I think that what we've seen basically in everything that we do at the commission is, all these issues crop up when the rubber really hits the road. And in this case, the PCIA is something that was initially charged to large commercial and industrial customers that receive service under what's called direct access. So direct access is a different way of getting generation supply. And frankly, there aren't care commercial and industrial customers. It's never been an issue. And so when they had originally thought about this, when they had initially established the rules, the rate design was entirely different, and there were still customers that were care customers that could receive service under kind of a direct access program. But basically after the energy crisis, all of the direct access is no longer allowed to serve residential customers. And so it just hasn't been an issue. And so now when the utilities are looking at their tariffs and saying, oh gosh, we really didn't think about that 6 years ago, we better fix that now, kind of scrambling to, put in an advice letter or, address it in a proceeding. Yeah, Director Bailey.
Sorry. Dawn, can I just ask you a question about something you just said so I understand it properly? Sloan Bailey from Corte Madera. Two questions. The first one is, did I understand you are slightly concerned that if we are successful in eliminating the PCIA charge for our care customers, that charge may be redistributed to the rest of our customers? Did I understand that?
No, I wouldn't say that's concerned. What I'd say is that there's a lack of clarity about how these charges are being applied. And yeah, I think it's on.
Did it go off? No. Turn it over and turn on.
Okay. It's giving me a little battery thing. Yeah, I was just saying that there's not clarity.
I mean, is that one possible result, though?
Yeah, so they're already doing these exemptions for medical baseline customers, and the way that that actually works is they just don't collect those revenues, and that kind of gets put into this sort of overall slush of funds that isn't specifically redistributed to anybody else. It just gets run back into the utilities revenue requirement and just gets redistributed over all customers generally. And so it isn't that it gets recharged through the PCIA, it just gets recharged across all ratepayers.
And likewise, the fact that the other investor-owned utilities are not charging that, or for the medical baseline customers, is that because those charges likewise are otherwise being reshuffled into all customers, not just CCA customers?
I don't know about the rate design for SCE and SDG&E, and it's possible that they haven't even thought about it because they haven't had those subset of customers. So just running through the calculations, I don't know exactly where it would land.
Okay, I'm just wondering about unintended consequences at all.
Mhm.
And then the last thing is, do we have any kind of proceeding underway now to revisit the PCIA generally?
We do not. That is an excellent question and something that I wish that the commission would bring up. A couple of years ago, MCE led a consortium of about 50 or so parties to request that that exit fees be revisited generally. That the then president of the Public Utilities Commission said that that was the proper method for going about that. The president of the Public Utilities Commission then denied our petition for rulemaking. So no, there is no home for it, and we hope to create a home for it, but until then, we're dealing with these issues proactively, but on an ad hoc basis. So, and there's various proceedings that we're involved in. One is the long-term procurement proceeding. Are you properly projecting CCA loads so that these PCIA fees are minimized? Resource adequacy proceeding. How can we ensure that we can bring on our own resource adequacy on a long-term basis, and that counts, so we're not being charged this separate fee called CAM, cost allocation mechanism. In the energy resource recovery account, that's where we had been dealing with this CARE issue. We're also dealing with PCIA vintaging issue, which that gets very much into the weeds. So the vintaging issue is still being dealt with there. The low-income issue got kicked into the low-income proceeding. So it's a smattering across a wide range of proceedings to deal with these charges. Yeah.
What's been interesting about the CARE and PCIA issue is that it's actually elevated the profile of the PCIA issues amongst a larger group of ratepayer advocates. So, for example, today we've seen protests filed by Lancaster Choice Energy, the County of LA, Local Energy Aggregation Network, the Green Landing Institute, and the Center for Accessible Technologies, all addressing the PCIA, which, 2 or 3 months ago, a lot of them would have said, what's a PCIA? So we're hoping that as we raise the visibility of this issue, we'll continue to be able to make strides on it in a larger way in the future.
Okay. Yes,
Again,
Director
Kevin
Harrell.
Haroff, just to echo that sentiment, if there are opportunities because of changes that are going on with the commission that have happened recently, other developments like the ones we've been discussing, to really create opportunities to address this issue in a straightforward way rather than piecemealing it, we ought to exploit those opportunities everywhere we can.
Absolutely. And I think that we do have kind of a larger strategy of how do we raise those. And that's something that I can come back to the board with for, to evaluate more proactive proposals if that would be of interest. Electric vehicles. So this one is a little bit complicated on the procedural front. We have actually 3 separate EV proceedings, a PG&E proceeding, a Southern California Edison proceeding, and a consolidated rulemaking and SDG&E proceeding. They're each in different sort of procedural postures. Oops, sorry, let me go back here. This is something that I presented to you before, but just so folks are aware, the 3 investor-owned utilities have each put forward a proposal to install EV charging infrastructure in their service territories. And so in general, we are tremendously supportive of the installation of this of this infrastructure. The big issue that we have, though, is, especially in the case of SDG&E and PG&E, they are also proposing to own everything through the charging station itself. And so for us, this is a very big and just significant competitive overreach. They're also planning on taking over a significant amount of the market share. So in SCE's case, 33% of the market share of EV charging stations. In PG&E's case, 25%. 25% in PG&E's service territory. So 1 in 4 of every single one of the EV charging stations that you walk past on the street would be owned, soup to nuts by PG&E. And in total, the 3 utilities are asking for over $1 billion in order to implement these strategies. $1 billion is a lot of money. So what MCE has recommended, we did a motion to consolidate. And basically what we said is these three proceedings should be combined into one proceeding and dealt with on a consistent basis on a policy matter, both to deal with these competitive issues, to ensure that all of the customers are benefiting. So for example, you wouldn't just ignore CCA communities and install them in non-CCA communities, and also making sure that there's enough inclusivity for low-income communities. Those are our 3 core issues. So we did a motion to consolidate the Office of Ratepayer Advocates, which is a part of the CPUC. They also did a separate motion to consolidate. Okay, and things sort of people fall into 2 camps on this, and so it's been a little controversial. So MCE, part of our motion, it was jointly filed with these entities, Clean Coalition, Green Power Institute, TURN. TURN is the major consumer advocacy group here. These are other ratepayer advocacy groups, Energy Storage Alliance, Vote Solar, and Shell Energy North America, so a really wide range of parties. Our motion for consolidation was opposed by other environmental parties, so the environmental parties are split on this. It was also opposed, not surprisingly, by the Automobile Manufacturers Association, because they'd like to see this go through pretty quickly, so the infrastructure is there for their vehicles, and then the utilities and the union of the utilities. So we do not yet have information on whether those are going to be consolidated or not, but we just did want to reiterate that we really deeply want to see more EV infrastructure, but we just need to make sure that it's done in a thoughtful way and that we're not spending $1 billion of ratepayer funds just in a blink of an eye. So that's our participation there. The 2015 legislative session, here is Shalini and Dawn and I in Sacramento by the bear. So I think that's like I think that's the Sacramento picture that everybody has to have. So, and we have it, so we're halfway there, right? Anyways, Shalini, do you want to talk about legislative, or would you like me to? Okay, great. Shalini is very deeply immersed in our legislative work, so she can correct me when I'm wrong. So we are active participants in several pieces of legislation. One of them is the SB 350, which is the 50-50-50 benchmarks bill. This is the governor's plan to increase renewables to 50%, to reduce petroleum use by 50%, and to increase energy efficiency in buildings by 50%. A big issue for us is obviously we strongly support all of these benchmarks. There is a very concerning provision which would increase the use of this cost allocation mechanism. So basically, utilities buying power plants and charging those costs to our customers. That is in this bill. And so we have very significant concerns about the inclusion of that provision. And so we are working to get that provision struck. A couple of items in the legislative session is, there's a couple that we've supported. This is AB 802. And this is expanding EE implementation measures. So basically right now, there is cost savings are measured on, you take Title 24 And whatever you save above Title 24 is kind of what your savings are. Well, it just assumes that all buildings have already met Title 24. And so very few energy efficiency projects are cost effective. And so we would like to have energy efficiency projects reflect their actual savings to the grid, not just these above code savings. We also have supported the deployment of EV infrastructure and protecting competitive markets here. So this is this goes in tandem with our participation in the EV proceedings at the CPUC. And then we are also we are planning on supporting the AB 1330 Bloom bill, which is sets higher standards for meeting energy efficiency goals in all of the load serving entities portfolios. So obviously we would like to see more of that in ours and in everybody else's. Oops. Oh no. Okay. Then I can't go backwards actually. So apparently we aren't worried about those last bills on the last slide. Okay, great. So there's a couple of other bills that we're monitoring. There's a direct access bill, so we're monitoring that. That is also, how do people choose to receive their generation services? It is direct access in general is pretty controversial up in Sacramento. We're basically staying out of it. There is a bill related to emissions performance standards that raises some challenges for MCE, so we're trying to get some revisions there. And there is a bill that would basically exempt certain customers from paying the PCIA and other charges that we're keeping a close eye on. And as usual, there's a whole slew of CPUC reform bills based on all the ex parte violations and other issues that have happened. So basically, we've been keeping Shalini very, very, very busy. Yes, job security. Sacramento is a unique place. So that's it. That's the whole of my presentation. Sorry, it was a little bit long. I will make it shorter.
Questions for Beth? Yeah, Peter.
Proceedings. When you say they're asking for $1 billion, is that $1 billion to increase in their rates to cover the cost of these that they would pass on to the customers?
Yes, that's right. And so it would just be, the build out of all of the infrastructure and putting in, and in the case of SDG&E and PG&E, putting in the charging stations as well. Right. Those would all be borne by all ratepayers.
And then I was just curious why, what was the thinking behind the environmental groups that have aligned with the investor-owned utilities on these issues? Because I'm just curious what the environmental appeal is for supporting that, $1 billion rate increase.
Yeah, the idea is how quickly do you think you can get all of these EV charging stations deployed? And at what cost? Both the financial cost and also the market cost. And so there are some environmental parties that say, we really need to think about how we're going to be spending $1 billion before we spend it, and just come up with protocols. Until this year, the IOUs were prohibited from entering into this line of business, so like the charging stations. And so there is a lot of uncertainty in what the rules of the game are right now. And so there are a lot of environmental groups that think, okay, if you consolidate these proceedings, you're going to slow down the proceedings. We're going to get outcomes more slowly. And then there's other environmental groups that are saying, okay, we really need to think about how we're going to deploy these. So, yeah. Are there any other questions?
Great presentation, Beth. I also thought the summary memos that Shalini and Jeremy did were really well done. Very clearly presented the information. So thank you for the new formatting. It's all good.
Yeah. We're making all sorts of.
You are making a lot of progress.
Changes. Hopefully, make it easier and make it really fun. It's like can we call it the regulatory fiesta next time? Maybe I don't know.
Any minute. All right.
Okay, that one didn't go so well, but. Anyways, it's been a pleasure. And does anybody else have questions? Okay.
We're good.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Any other board and staff matters?
I do have one.
Oh,
sorry.
darn it, Dawn, I was too slow.
One board matter. I just wanted to make sure folks are aware that of what our schedule is for the coming month as far as board meetings go. Because of the shift in our meeting date, we're going to be not holding a meeting in July because it's kind of in the heart of the summer and we're anticipating a lot of vacations. And then we will be holding a meeting in August. That'll be the third Thursday in August, so that'll be our normal meeting time. And then in September, we're going to do something slightly different with the retreat. And instead of making you all come to a board meeting and a retreat in the same month, we are looking to hold the retreat on the Thursday that we typically have the board meeting. We'll take care of any board business that is needed at the beginning of the meeting, but we'll try and keep that very light and dedicate the day to a retreat at the usual time. And for those of you that are new to our board, we hold our retreat typically from 9 to 4 at the Marin Art and Garden Center in Ross. So we're working on plans for that now, but just wanted to give you a heads up that that's what we'll be expecting to do in September.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.